Hi. Thank you. So we have a bunch of different topics today. We started off with theater, now we have poker, and who knows what we're going to have next. So I'm going to be talking about how to beat poker with the help of Ruby. And just to start things off, how many of you have actually played poker before? Oh, wow. And how many of you lost money playing poker? All right, awesome, awesome. So hopefully this will give you the tools to stop losing money. So my name is Assaf Gerber. As Lance said, I'm coming in from Israel. I've been a Rubyist for the past 5 years. And I've also been an amateur poker player for 5 or 6 years. And this connection between math and programming and poker has always brought me to kind of try to use my skills as a programmer for poker and other things that I do. I also like coffee and riding bicycles, but I haven't tried any programming skills for those yet. Probably next year. Random fun fact about myself. Tomorrow's my birthday. Thank you. So thanks to everyone for organizing this huge event. You didn't really have to. I really don't know what to say. Thank you. So I work for the PayPal Consumer Product Center in Tel Aviv, where we are building the next generation of consumer-facing products for PayPal. For something like almost 170 million different people in 210 different countries, I think. The scale is just enormous, and it's really awesome to work on projects of this scale. The latest thing that we launched is PayPal.me, which unfortunately is not available in South Africa yet, but it's available in the States and I think around 17 other countries in Europe. Hopefully it'll get here someday. Right, so I'd like to start off by just giving a disclaimer that this is Poker Talk. I'm going to be talking a lot about poker. There is going to be Ruby, I promise. But this is actually the first time that I'm giving this talk in a place where it's legal to play poker and casinos are accessible, so I don't have the stress of being escorted off by police during the talk, so that's always nice. Right. So I'm only going to be talking about no-limit Texas Hold'em poker, which is the most popular variation of poker at the moment. So everything I say is going to be true for Texas Hold'em. Probably some things are going to be true for other things as well, but I'm going to focus only on Texas Hold'em. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I will start off by giving a short introduction about poker in general. So if you've already played poker before, like most of you, now is the time to tweet about Sarah's talk or check your emails or whatever and come back to this later on. So a lot of people, when they think about poker, they think about James Bond. Okay. Casino Royale, James Bond is looking the villain in the eyes and he notices his nose twitch a little bit and he says to himself, his nose is twitched, he must be bluffing, I'm gonna go all in. And everyone calls and everyone has these amazing hands and people are trying to shoot James Bond, but then he just runs away, but he wins the hand and he gets the money and he stays alive, and yeah, so it's not like that at all. It's actually more like this. Nerds, no offense to that guy, sitting in front of their computers and they're playing 12 or 16 tables at a time. And in each situation that they're in, they're trying to determine the most statistically profitable decision. And we're going to be talking a lot about this statistically profitable decision today and how we make that. So a hand of Texas Hold'em looks like this. In this case, we have 2 players. So each one is dealt 2 hole cards, which are known only to him, they're private. And we have 5 board cards, which are shared for everyone. So you try to make the best 5-card hand from the 7 cards that you have available to you, right? The 5 on the board and the 2 that you have. So a hand starts off by each player being dealt 2 cards. And we have what we call a round of betting. A round of betting basically means if the current bet is 200 rand, each player in turn has to decide whether he's just going to call 200 rand to move on to the next round, whether he's going to raise to make the others have to call, or whether he's going to fold, which is just forfeiting the hand, not putting any more money in, and if everyone folds, the 1 player remaining wins the hand. So assuming people called the bet, we go into the flop, which is the first 3 cards of the 5 shared community cards. We have 1 more round of betting. We have the turn card, which is the next shared card, one more round of betting, the river card, one more round of betting, and lastly, the showdown. In the showdown, each player turns over their cards, and we see who has the best hand. Now, I'm just going to run through the hand rankings because I'm going to be throwing some of these around later on, so just try to catch a few of these. We have high card, which is the worst possible hand. Everything is uncoordinated. The value of the hand is just determined by the highest card that you have. One pair, just two cards at the same rank. Two pair, two sets of cards in the same rank. Three of a kind is pretty self-explanatory. A straight, which is all 5 cards in ascending order, one after the other. So in this case, it's a straight from 5 to 9. A flush, which is all 5 cards in the same suit. Full house, which is 3 of a kind plus another pair. 4 of a kind, which again is pretty much self-explanatory. And the strongest hand in poker is a straight flush, where all 5 cards are in ascending order and in the same suit. So back to our example, we have 2 diamonds in our hand plus 3 more diamonds on the board, so we have a flush. And our opponent has 2 jacks in his hand plus another jack on the board, so 3 of a kind. So in this case, we win. So at this point, I usually get people saying, okay, that's easy enough. Why are you talking to me about this? We just deal out the cards and see who wins, right? Why would I need math for this? So let's look at a specific example and see why we need math for poker in general. So again, we have the 5, 6 of diamonds. We're playing against 2 jacks. And on the board, we already have the king of diamonds, the 8 of diamonds, a deuce, and an ace. So in the pot, there's already 1,000 rands from previous betting rounds. And our opponent just bet 200 rands. So now we're in a situation where we have to determine what the most statistically profitable decision for us is. So let's break this down and see how we do that. There are 52 cards in a deck of cards. 8 of them are already out, so there are 44 remaining cards. Now, in order to win this hand, we need to get one more diamond, right? Because if we get a 5 or 6, our opponent still has a better pair than us. So we have to get one more diamond to complete our flush. There are 13 diamonds in a deck of cards. 4 of them are already out, so there are 9 remaining diamonds in the deck. This means that 9 out of the 44 remaining cards will give us the win. So we have around 20% of winning this hand. Now, we need to pay 200 rands for the chance to win 1,200, right? The 1,000 that are in the pot plus 200 that our opponent just bet. And again, our chances of winning are 1 to 4, so we lose 4 times for every 1 time we win. However, we're being paid 1 to 6, right? For the 1 time that we win, we get 6 times the money that we put in, and we're winning 1 in every 5 hands. So this is definitely, in the long run, a statistically profitable decision for us. So this is an easy call. And again, at this point, I get people saying, okay, that's easy enough. Thomas Bayes, the guy in the background, he taught us all about Bayesian statistics. This is RubyConf. Why would I need Ruby for this? Why are you here? Go away. So let's look at one more example, and hopefully I can prove to you that this talk means something for Ruby. Same situation, we have 5, 6 diamonds. We're playing against 2 jacks. 1,000 rands already in the pot. Our opponent is betting 200, but this time we're before the flop. We don't know any of the community cards that are going to be on the board. And we have to make a statistically profitable decision again. So let's take the same approach that we did before. 52 cards in the deck, only 4 of them are out, so there are 48 remaining cards. Now, what do we need to get in order to win this hand? We could get a 5 and a 6 for 2 pairs, but then he could get another jack for a 3 of a kind, which would beat us. We can still get a straight or a flush, but we need a bunch of cards for that. We need 3 more diamonds. So in total, there are 34,246,080 different possibilities of board cards that could come here. And some of them would give us the win, and some of them would not. Again, that's 34,246,080 different possibilities. Now what? Right, so this is where software comes in. We have poker calculators. They give us the odds of matching up hands against each other. So in this case, if we input 5, 6 of diamonds versus 2 jacks, we see that the jacks have around 77% of winning. The 5, 6 of diamonds has around 22, and there's a very slight chance of them tying, which is awesome because now we have more information to make that decision. But how do these work? And the answer is super cool math, obviously. So this is actually my favorite slide in this whole deck because I'm going to get to say quantum physics pretty soon, and you're all going to think I'm very smart, but we'll get to that in a moment. So the Monte Carlo method is a statistical analysis method, which basically means do random stuff and draw conclusions. So if we have a specific situation, we can get a huge number of samples of possible results from the situation that we're in and try to look back and determine from the results that we got what was the actual statistical situation that we were in. And this sounds super silly, I know, but it's used in quantum physics and fluid dynamics and computer graphics and AI for a bunch of different games. It's really a reputable strategy for statistical analysis of situations like this. And to prove that, I'm going to show the hello world example of the Monte Carlo method, which is making an approximation of pi. And we're going to do that with this little chart right here. We have a square, which is 1 by 1. And inside it, we have a quarter of a circle with a radius of 1. So the area of the square is 1 squared. And the area of the quarter circle is 1 squared times pi divided by 4, because it's just a quarter of a circle. So the ratio between the areas of these two shapes is 1 squared times pi divided by 4 over 1 squared, which is just pi divided by 4. Now, if we were to take a huge number of random points inside the square and see how many of them fall into that quarter circle, the ratio of points in the quarter circle to the whole number of points we have is supposed to be the same ratio as their areas, statistically speaking. So let's see that in code. We're going to first install a gem for Monte Carlo simulations, which gives us a wrapper to run these experiments and a few methods to analyze the results that we get. So this is the whole code that we need for this. What we're doing here is defining the origin point as the bottom left corner of the square, which is also the center of the circle. And we're going to create an experiment, and we're going to run it 1 million times, and each time we are going to get a point inside the square. And we're going to check to see the distance of that point from our origin point. So this will return true if the point is inside the circle and otherwise false. So after running that 1 million times, we look at what the probability of getting true was, and we multiply that by 4 to get pretty close to pi. So we just did in 8 lines of Ruby what Archimedes did in with 96-sided polygons and a bunch of measurements to try to get an approximation of pi. And we did that with 8 lines of Ruby and got much closer than he did. So obviously this method works. Right, so let's build a calculator. But first, we need to talk about hand ranking, right? How do I know in code that one hand is better than another? So I've actually seen 3 different ways to do this so far. The first one is a boring decremental way where you just have a set of rules for each of the hands, right? So if I have 5 cards in the same suit, I have a flush. And if I have 3 cards of the same rank, I have 3 of a kind, and so on and so on. And it just goes really slow, right? We can't use this for running simulations 1 million times, right? It's going to take forever. The second way is a cool regex way, which I actually saw implemented in a Ruby gem by Rob Olson, where he would encode each of the hands that he has, each of the cards, as 3 characters. So the first character would be the distance from the current card to the previous card. The second character is just the rank of the card. And the third character is the suit. So we have H for hearts and D for diamonds and so on. And he had a bunch of regex patterns for each of the possible hands. And I thought this was really, really cool. Again, it's kind of slow for us. But I thought this was a really, really cool way of actually getting the rank from the hand. And it's actually a pretty challenging exercise to try to rewrite some of these regex patterns to parse out the different hand rankings. But lastly, we have the fast bitmass table way, which is implemented in a library called PokerStove, which is kind of the standard library which is used for simulations in poker, where what they did is encode each of the different hands, all the possible hands. They would encode it in some bitmask way and save it to a file. And now when you have another hand, you just encode it in the same way, load up the file, and a simple table lookup would just give you the rank of the hand. So this is super, super fast. They also did a bunch of other really cool things to make these simulations super, super fast. And even though I said quantum physics earlier, there's no way I can explain all the cool stuff that they did here. But I do urge you to read their code. It's pretty amazing in mathematical terms. Right, so let's build a calculator. We're done. This is all we need to actually get a complete working poker odds calculator that we can actually use while we play. And what we're doing here is pretty simple. It's kind of straightforward. We're creating a deck, and we're drawing the two hands that we need. So in this case, the 5-6 of diamonds against the 2 jacks. And we're creating an experiment and running it 1 million times again. And each time we're going to shuffle the deck. We're going to draw 5 cards to act as our shared board cards. And we're going to compare the two hands. So this operator will return 1 if the first hand won, -1 if the second hand won, and 0 if they tied. So if we look at the probability distribution of the results that we got, we see that we actually get pretty close to what the calculator told us. So again, the 2 jacks have, in this case, around 78% of winning versus 21% for the 5-6 diamonds. And we are going to get some variation here since we're only running it 1 million times. Obviously, the more times you run this, the more the results are going to converge into something that gets more predictable, but for this case, 1 million times is enough. And again, this can actually be used while you're playing. It only took about, 10 lines of Ruby, and it's super helpful to make assessments of situations that you're in. However, it's actually not that simple. I've been lying to you this whole time. And it's not that simple because of 2 main reasons. The first one is that we don't really know what our opponent has. In all the examples that I showed, we knew we had the 5-6 diamonds, but we knew we were playing against 2 jacks. Where in reality, poker would be a very boring game if that was the case. And the second thing that kind of interrupts here is that we don't really know what our opponent is going to do next, right? So if he's betting 200 rands now and we think it's statistically profitable for us to call, he might bet 2,000 rands in the next round of betting, and that would have completely changed the way we think about the hand. So that is not enough for us. But let's see how we can solve these 2 issues. So this is what a hand of poker really looks like to us. We know we have the 5-6 diamonds, but we don't know what we're playing against. So the way this is solved is that poker is actually a game of ranges of hands. In each situation that we're in, we try to assign a possible range of hands that our opponent could have here. With which hands could he act and make the same decisions that he's made so far? So what's the range of hands that he could have here? So for example, if we know our opponent really well and we know that he's only going to be betting 200 rands here, if he has a very strong starting hand, that range can look like this to us. So he could have ace queen, which is a pretty strong hand, ace king, all the way up to 2 kings or 2 aces, which are the best starting hands in poker, and somewhere in that range is also 2 jacks. And we know how our hand plays against each of the hands in his range, so we can still get a sort of statistical feeling about the situation in regards to which of the possible hands he could have. So this can help us make a better assessment of the situation, right? The more we know about the player, the more we can narrow down that range and possibly even to one specific hand where we think he could only make this decision if he had this specific hand, and hopefully we're correct. But there's a tool that can help us be correct more of the time, which is hand history. Now this is only true for playing poker online, because you can just get a complete dump of all the hands that you've played against every opponent that you've played so far. And you can look back in times at the previous hand that you played and try to get to know your opponent better from the decisions that he's made in the past. And this can solve both issues for us, because we know what range of hands he could have that would play the way he's playing now, and see what he's done later on in the hand by looking back at the hands that he's played already. So the hand history gives us 3 super critical insights while we're playing. The first one is actually what he's likely to have, right? So if we played against this opponent thousands of hands before, and we've been in this specific situation hundreds of times, and every time he did what he decided to do now, he had specifically one hand or a very small range of hands, we can assume that he's going to have that again, because humans are just predictable that way. So this really lets us narrow down that range according to what he had in the past. The second is what he's likely to do next, right? So again, if we were in this situation hundreds of times before against his opponent, and he's always decided to do one specific thing, we can assume that he's going to do that again. And the third is how he's likely to react to the things we do, which again is the same. If we were in the situation and we've done something, and he's always reacted in a specific manner, so we've raised and he's folded every time, we can assume that if we're going to raise now again, he's going to fold. So this is super, super critical when we're playing against opponents that we've played a lot against. This does require a pretty big sample size, but when you're playing online, you can play thousands of hands a day and really get to know your opponents really, really well. And this really actually lets you read the minds of your opponents. And I was actually contemplating whether to put reading minds here, because I thought like making better guesses sounds pretty boring. So reading minds, I thought it was better. And it only takes a little bit of parsing with Ruby. So to finish off, I just want to show 3 very simple statistics that we can use by parsing the hand history to try to classify our opponents and the way he's playing. So what we're going to do is going to fire up our hand history, and we're going to look for all the hands that we've played against our opponent, JBonds 007. And the first stat that we're going to look at is VPIP. VPIP stands for voluntarily put money in pot, which means how many of the hands that he was dealt has he decided to play with. So he didn't just fold straight away and forfeit the hand because he thought he doesn't have any chance of winning. Now, the lower this number is, we call our opponent tighter. And we can assume that he's only deciding to play very strong hands, right? There's no reason for him to fold a good hand before the flop. And statistically speaking, he's going to get very good hands only a small percentage of the time. So if he plays a very small percentage of the hands, we can assume that if he decided to play, he has a strong hand. And the opposite's true. If he plays a lot of different hands, we call that player looser. So if he decided to play a hand, that doesn't necessarily mean that he has a strong hand. He could be playing hands that aren't very good. The second statistic is the aggression frequency, which basically means how many of the decisions that he's making are aggressive decisions. So how much has he decided to raise rather than just call or even fold. So when this number is very high, we can be wary that if we've decided to play a hand against this opponent, we can assume that we're going to have to call a lot of money to move on to the next stages because he's going to be betting a lot. And again, the opposite's true. If our opponent is passive, meaning he doesn't raise a lot, we can try to reach a showdown with hands that we don't want to put a lot of money in the pot with because we know that he's not going to be betting very often. So the third statistic is just the simplest one here. Just look at the hands that he's reached showdown with. So if he's reaching showdown with hands that aren't very strong and losing a lot of the showdowns, for example, like hands with a high card or just one pair, so if he's playing back at us, I mean, if we're raising and he's calling or the other way around, we know that he doesn't necessarily have a very strong hand because he has a tendency to reach showdown with hands that are pretty strong. And again, the opposite's true. If he's only reaching showdown with super strong hands and he's winning every time, we can assume that if he's playing back at us, he has a very strong hand. And we can adjust our game according to these 3 statistics and really try to understand how our opponent's thinking and what he would do with the hands that he could possibly have now. However, I've been lying again. It's actually not that simple. These are just like, this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of statistics, right? When we're playing poker online, we need a lot of more information than the 3 things that I show here. The 3 things here, they can give us like a better understanding of the player, but in order to really understand the person that we're playing, we have to look at much more than that. And poker is a super intricate game in terms of strategy. And for example, if you're playing against a very good player, he's going to know that you're looking at his statistics. And he's going to look at his statistics as well and try to think what you're going to assume about him and go one level higher than that. So if you know that he's looking at your statistics and you're adjusting your game to his statistics and he's adjusting himself, you can go one level higher. And it just gets really mind-boggling that way. So if you're playing a very good player, you really try to have to understand not only how he's playing, but on what level he's thinking versus what level you're thinking on. So it just gets like super crazy deep, and people really devote their lives to playing poker professionally and make a lot of money from this. But you really, really have to deeply understand the mechanics and the strategy and your different players and the decisions that they can possibly make. So I love poker. I really think that it's an amazing game. So I do urge you to give it a try. But don't blame me for the money that you lose initially. Thank you very much.